I recently heard a term by the name of green inflation. So what is this new sort of inflation which has come into picture?
Okay, the reason is that particularly it's happening in Europe.
Okay.
Since you are incentivizing low carbon technologies,
Okay.
okay, and you are also penalizing companies, okay, and the company need to pay carbon prices or carbon taxes to the government, okay, so they need to pass on that increase in cost to consumers, for example energy prices, okay, so they need to pass on that cost. Since these companies are paying carbon taxes or carbon price, the cost of operation increases, okay, that's one part, okay, so it will increase, it is going to create inflationary pressure in an economy. Second part is that you are subsidizing renewable energy, but you are penalizing, let's say, thermal energy or so. So the cost of thermal energy, and you are not investing enough. That's the reason energy security issue happened after the Ukraine war. There are not enough energy in the country because you shifted very, very quickly from a high carbon intensive energy system and to a low carbon system. You don't have an adequate amount of energy available. So it created an inflationary pressure. That's the reason you are listening to green inflation. But I would like to highlight a very, very important component. Climate change is also creating inflationary pressure in the country. Okay, you might have heard recently Reserve Bank of India, they said that climate change is making the monetary policy instruments ineffective. Okay, the primary objective of monetary policy instrument is to maintain price stability. And climate change, because of climate change, it is affecting the food production. Okay, if it's affecting the food production directly, and monetary policy has little to do to increase food production. So whatever conventional monetary policy instruments you are using to cool down the inflation pressure, you are not able to do. Okay, you need to see that alternative ways to incentivize the practices which will make them to stabilize inflation in an economy.
So which brings me to my next question. So you have been talking about a lot in terms of green taxation or carbon taxation. So there is another, not exactly a term, it's quite an old term, but a new concept to me per se, which talks about carbon border adjustment mechanism.
Right.
Right. Which is mostly levied on the imports and the exports which take place. And since Goa in itself has a very huge export and import business going on, so can you just tell us as to how can it have a potential impact on the ecosystem or the economy of India?
Okay, so the idea of CBAM is that there's something called to stop carbon leakages.
Right.
Okay, for example, European Union is coming out new rules and regulations for companies which are based in the Europe to pay carbon as per the emission they are generating. But unfortunately, companies which were earlier in Europe, they shifted their manufacturing facility to other countries, still exporting those goods and services to Europe. Okay, to stop carbon leakages, the intention was that to come out with CBAM. If you are an exporting country or exporting company and you are exporting to Europe, based on the carbon intensity of your goods and services, you need to pay a tariff to Europe. Okay, that's the idea. The objective is to incentivize companies uh, to adopt low carbon technology so that you can reduce your carbon intensity of your production or services, or penalizing companies if you are following high carbon intensive business practices. Okay, but unfortunately, it has a negative impact on developing countries, which they just recovered from COVID-19. Now they are facing this kind of tariff barriers because they have not contributed to GHG emissions significantly. Only developed countries have contributed. Now you are forcing them to adopt expensive low carbon technologies. Otherwise, they will not be competitive in Western market.
Okay. And since Goa has a huge naval base that way, and we do import and export a lot of things in and out of India, how will the CBAM or what sort of impact does CBAM has for a state like Goa?
CBAM is currently restricted to steel industry. Okay, I think this year or next year it will be compulsory for steel producers. And steel producers in India anyway worried about that because it's becoming extremely difficult for them to compete with Chinese steel producers. So on adding that, we have CBAM. So they are worried. Government of India is trying to support steel producers in the country. We need to see that what kind of products we are producing in Goa and which are the locations, which are the countries we are exporting. For example, if we are exporting to United States, CBAM doesn't matter actually because the new administration in the United States, he is not a climate believer, which is good actually for carbon intensive businesses. But on the other side, as a state, and Goa as a state, I can see that government is coming out a number of initiatives. Okay, one of the initiatives to see that how this CBAM kind of policies are going to adversely affect those businesses, particularly like you mentioned that, okay, there is no carbon pricing mechanism in the country, but the market where you are exporting, they have a carbon pricing mechanism. So how we can support those companies in Goa? Okay, what kind of products they are exporting? Okay, can we create an ecosystem so that they can they can deploy low carbon technologies to reduce carbon emission?
Okay, okay. Moving ahead with this conversation, so we have touched upon a lot of small issues under the domain of sustainable finance, where we have touched upon livelihoods, both in India as well as specifically in the state of Goa. We have talked about sustainable finance and its role vis-a-vis with the other domains, and how can the regulatory authority sort of provide the interventions as and when required, right? The question which is coming to my mind is, should the regulatory authorities, and by regulatory authorities here I do not mean the people who are there to maintain the mechanisms, but more to do with the government authorities in general, should they focus more on the development of the state or the city, or should they focus more on uplifting the living standard of the people by bringing them closer to the nature? So it's more of your profit maximization objective, as we call it in finance, or your wealth maximization objective.
It's a difficult question for me. So we need to remember that climate change is also a developmental challenge. It's a developmental issue. Okay, one is that climate change is adversely affecting your economic growth. So you need to take steps to adapt to climate change. If you are not able to contribute to mitigate it, at least you can take steps to adapt it. Okay, that is essential. So since the role of state becomes very critical, because it's not about individuals or a single corporation is taking initiative to mitigate climate change, we need a collective actions. Okay, when we are talking about collective actions, and the state is trying to uplift or alleviate poverty in any state or improve the standard of living at the same time facing the climate change challenge, now they are speaking to each other. Okay, it's not like that. We cannot separate climate actions with the developmental goals of any state, of any country. Okay, so you have to do both. As I said earlier, climate change is putting inflation pressure. It means that you need to do something on climate action. Otherwise, food prices will increase. Okay, for example, temperature is increasing all over the world, including Goa also. So can you do something to reduce temperature in the city? Okay, like we discussed earlier about green buildings, we're talking about heat resistance shelters also, particularly, or the kind of resorts you are erecting in Goa also. Can you reduce the temperature of the resort so that you cannot use those highly energy consuming gadgets or household appliances or air conditioners? So in that type of possibility, it's not about the trade-off between economic growth or development goals and climate change. We should see the complementarity between them. There is a strong positive correlation between these two.
And actually, as you're talking, I'm hearing so many opportunities for novel ways of cooling, opportunities for different skills, livelihoods, small business, clean tech, opportunities to take maybe some of the traditional knowledge about how to keep things cool and somehow find a way to create small businesses or opportunities at the local level to achieve this. So it seems to me that there's also like looking for the opportunities is where we can bring those two things together.
Absolutely. I mean, you are absolutely right that climate change is also an offering to change the way of life and create employment opportunity in a local market, in a domestic market, or in the same state. Okay, so we need to identify, okay, what are the business model, what are the technologies, what are the solutions, okay, the state which is peculiar to states, okay, and as a state or as a community, okay, can we identify those solutions, and those solutions can be scalable also, okay. So it is important that we need to identify why this solution is not scalable, what are the challenges these solutions are facing. At the same time, as you rightly mentioned, can it be a business for the youth? Okay, can it be a business to which the existing corporation can expand into? Okay, it's a possibility. Okay, here we're talking about so many technologies starting from renewable energy generation to energy storage to batteries. Okay, there are climate smart agriculture also, which can be an investment opportunities. For example, for farmers also. And now, certain farmers also can also sell something called green credit to large corporations as well, which will offer them additional source of revenue or income. Okay, for example, if they follow water savings mechanism, possibly there could be incentive mechanism can be created. If you save water a certain amount, there will be additional incentive can come from the government also. So you are giving incentives to follow certain practices, which will also help the states as well. But the point is that we need to identify those solutions, bring those solutions together, and try to develop those solutions further and make it scalable. Okay, that's very critical. There where you need the support of each stakeholders, including the business schools, universities, states, as well as skill development institutions, and local communities also can also participate and benefit from the solutions.
Okay, so you have already talked about the sort of entrepreneurial, if I am putting it correctly, the entrepreneurial space which is available for the people to explore. From the investor's perspective, so if say, for instance, I am a retail investor, I am interested in investing my funds in this particular domain. So apart from the ESG index-based funds which are there available in the open market, what are the different avenues that I can probably explore?
Okay, so there are pure play financial products which are available, like you said, ESG funds. I cannot say that it is a pure play green finance product because there are some research which says that ESG funds are not really helping in climate actions, which is unfortunate. Some companies are mis-selling those financial products to investors. But there are pure play financial products like green bonds or transition bonds. And other instruments have not been so successful in India. But here as a retail investors, is it possible to identify companies which are responsible? Okay, for example, if you are retail investors, you are not going through a private equity route. Okay, you cannot invest in unlisted companies. You can invest in companies which are listed in the stock market responsible. Okay, for example, if you are retail investors, you are not going through a private equity route. Okay, you cannot invest in unlisted companies. You can invest in companies which are listed in the stock market. You are, and if you have a small size amount of money, it will be extremely difficult to enter into private equity or venture capital space. There are some listed companies which are pure play clean energy companies. For example, renewable energy generation, for example, wind turbine manufacturer, battery solutions provider, which are listed in the stock market. You can invest in this company. But it's a different thing that whether you will go to make money depends on what price you have bought that stock in the stock market. And that's one way you can enter. The other way is that by doing a little bit of research or by using, there is something called ESG rating, although it is a questionable rating methodology, so academicians are questioning that if I park the difference in green rating, can we combine, invest in those companies only which are helping in reducing carbon emission. They are following certain business practices, they are investing in research and development which can help them to reduce carbon emission. They are exiting from the businesses which are highly carbon intensive and entering into business space which are low carbon intensive. If you identify those companies, okay, you can invest in those companies also, okay, which are listed in the stock market. But if you are managing a massive amount of money and are willing and have an appetite to take a risk, you can invest in private equities companies or a venture capitalist, because there are many technologies which are not commercially viable and which are mostly funded by VCs, governments, and private equity funds. And there are certain private equity funds and VC funds that only invest in climate technologies. Okay, so you can put your money in those private equity funds if you cannot run those private equity funds themselves, and your money can be invested in climate technologies. So it's an opportunities for retail investors. But in addition to that, there is massive investment opportunity both for bankers and institutional investors like pension fund, insurance companies. In India, we need trillions of dollars of capital, 10 to 15 trillions. We don't know. Usually, I don't believe in forecasting, but we know that we need a massive amount of capital. It's an investment opportunity also in the green economic transition. Okay, so it means that people who are in the financial sector are going to benefit out of this if they identify right companies.
Right. So you have already said that you cannot apparently forecast what would happen. But still, looking at the sort of trends that we have been seeing, the transitions which have happened in the past, say, 10 years in this particular domain, where do you see the future of sustainable finance?
Okay, let me clarify that. I didn't say that forecasting, when you forecast something accurate, I don't trust that. So, I mean, future cannot be accurate at all. Okay. Okay, coming back to the trends, definitely we are going to deploy capital in low carbon technologies. We don't have a choice. Okay. We need to save the planet. We have the only planet. We need to save that. So, but unfortunately, there are certain political establishment in other countries, and they are not willing to believe in science, the climate science. Okay, that's an unfortunate part of the certain political establishment, which is wrong, which can be, I will say, which will be very short term in nature. Maybe next couple of years it may affect, but not much, because I can see actions from the private sector, I can see actions from the local government and state governments, particularly in the United States. The new administration may not believe in climate science, but the state, local governments in the United States, they trust that, okay, they need to do something in climate actions, which is very, very encouraging. So if I believe, or if I strongly believe in those governments' willingness and ability to make changes, particularly in the European Union. And countries like India also, we are taking the steps which are essential. I mean, we need to balance both growth and climate action since we are a developing country. By considering all of these things, I believe that capital will definitely flow and it will only accelerate in the future. So you will find a little bit of hindrances here and there, some obstacles, and we need to take initiatives to remove those obstacles. And by just looking at the obstacles, we should not be disappointed and sit idly and take any actions.
Thank you so much for that response, sir. Ms. Joanna, I've already asked sir about the sort of trends that he can probably foresee in the domain of sustainable finance. Can you sort of give us a trajectory for Goa in that domain, looking at the sort of pace at which Goa is now growing and investing more in infrastructure development? Where do you see Goa in the next 10 to 15 years?
Thank you for that question. So I think we stand at a crossroads, to be honest. I think there is a story of what progress and development means, which has been to date very extractive, destructive, not just to the environment, but to communities, to families, to mental health. It's the sort of fast-paced way of living has taken a high toll globally. And I think one of the reasons that we've seen in Goa a huge number of people come to Goa, particularly after the pandemic, is because Goa does it differently.
Right.
Goa has this sense of susagad. It's about taking your time to talk to your neighbor. It's about not working 15 hours a day. It's about taking your time for your festivals, for celebrating, for being in nature. It's about living with nature. So in some ways, Goa, like much of rural India, has a strong understanding of what it is to be essentially sustainable. And so I think what we're seeing now, we're seeing a lot of citizens' movements where villagers are really upset at what they see as a destruction of their fundamental identity in the type of rapid urbanization that is coming. And you get these very city-style constructions coming in where there's no airflow possible, so they have to have AC, and then they have the swimming pools. So there's a huge extraction of water and power from a village, which then becomes, like you said, we don't create energy in the States. So actually, there are scarcity issues because of this form of urbanization. Right. And so there is the possibility, we were discussing earlier, that we don't want all of rural India to come to the cities. The cities will completely collapse. What we need is to find viable ways for the villages to sustain and be climate resilient, but be prosperous. And I think Goa is very much in the fire of that right now, because we have to make choices about what kind of development we want. And I think what you were talking about, there's so much potential for modern, green, resilient, net zero villages, which have a lot of livelihood opportunities, which can meet the needs of the hour, both in terms of the social and the environmental requirements. And the people are really hungry for it because there's a sense of great loss. Right. That we need a more conscious approach to planning and to how we can plan for resilience and adaptation and mitigation and all of these things, and then leverage the investments that are going to be required to make that happen. So I'm part of a group of people. We've created a platform called ActforGoa, which is precisely for this, to bring all the different stakeholders together and say, we all love Goa. We know there's something deeply important about quality of life here. And because we're seeing migrants from all over urban India coming here, we know that. We can see that the air quality or the water quality, all of these things are indicators of high quality of life, even if that doesn't correlate to possibly what might be the income, of people. But it's really about what is the palpable quality of life. And so I think now we're really poised to mobilize stakeholders. We have this climate action plan, and we could, with the will of all the stakeholders, come together and prototype what this new form of modern sort of middle-class rural India could look like in a low-footprint way, and find pathways, like green pathways to prosperity. And I think it's not an either-or, as you said. So I would really hope that this is an opportunity for everyone to be excited. I feel, as someone who comes from the UK, I'm Anglo-Indian, that the potential for a new story of what success and progress looks like really can come, has to come from India, and really can come from rural India, because most of Asia actually looks like this. And so we need to solve for this. And so Goa has this opportunity to be a test bed, to be a place to really prototype and find out what does this low footprint, high quality of life look and feel like, and how can we share that with other parts of the world. So I feel optimistic that we can mobilize. The alternative is that we lose it. And I think that's too devastating to have to agree with. So we're going to have to fight for it.
So sort of you align with what Mr. Jena was initially talking about, the stakeholder activism has to be there more and more. So the European nations are already focusing on it, but we as an Indian nation, we need to,
Yeah, I think it's about responsible citizenship. Right. Whether you're a corporate citizen, whether you're an individual citizen, whether you're, because we all live somewhere. We're all a resident of somewhere, regardless of what our job is. And so first and foremost, like, what is our personal footprint? What are our consumer choices? Are we choosing that green option, or are we choosing that high footprint option? How are we choosing our livelihood? Is it right livelihood? Are we choosing something where we can say, like you were saying, I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem? Right. So I think there's huge opportunity right now across India to define a new global narrative of what the world could be. So let's do it.
Amen to that. So, with this, we sort of come to the conclusion of our podcast for today. Just before we actually end the session, I would like you to give some parting words of wisdom to our viewers, especially since we are in a B school setting, we are at Goa Institute of Management. So, what would you like to convey to the new generation of managers which would be graduating from the B schools all over the country?
Okay, since students, particularly youth, they are going to join corporations to the real economy, going to add value to the economy, they need to understand that climate change is a threat to corporations. Corporations who are not taking steps to mitigate climate change risk, they will lose their social license to operate, and they will not be competitive in nature. So it's not like you keep it under the carpet and keep on emitting carbon. That's not the pathway the economy is moving. It means that you have a responsibility when you join corporations or starting new businesses. You need to find out solutions to reduce carbon emissions wherever you are joining. Climate change is not only a threat or challenge. There are opportunities, there are business opportunities available for students who would like to start new businesses emanating from climate change. It could be energy storage or energy generation, green hydrogen, or modern technologies which will help the countries to reduce their carbon emission. So be prepared for that. I'm very confident that business schools are much more aware than our generation to take up the challenges and grab the opportunity they have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jena. Ms. Joanna, your parting words to our graduating students?
Yes, no, I would say that you live at the most exciting time of history that has been for many, many years, and the opportunity for take leadership and to really chart new pathways is yours to take, and don't think anybody else has the answers. It's up to us to join hands and create those answers, and you as the youth have the fresh thinking to be able to think outside the box. So always challenge and bring these ideas about sustainable finance, sustainable opportunities to your seniors in your offices, because they may not know about it. And so don't be shy in carrying the torch for a future that you can feel hopeful about.
Thank you so much, Ms. Joanne. Thank you so much, Mr. Jena. With this, we come to an end to our today's podcast. I would request everyone to stay tuned to the more podcasts which Goa Institute of Management would be releasing pretty soon. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.